republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Harmon, not yet present. Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, not yet present. Councilmember Sneddon, not yet present. Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. Okay, very good. And we have a presentation. Director Hastert.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Council members, we are happy to be here as the Airport Department to kick off the budget hearings for the city. With me today, I have Jonathan Abad, who's going to be going through a lot of the presentation, and then some of our managers and supervisors in the background that will be helping with specific questions. Sarah Iza, our development manager, Michael Smith, our operations manager, and Jessica Metzger, our senior planner. So with that, I'll kick it off to Jonathan.
All right, good morning, Mayor and Council. Good morning, Mayor and Council, city staff and manager, and members of the public. Today I'm presenting the Airport Department's proposed two-year plan for fiscal year 24 and 25. That's including the operating and capital budget. And in this presentation, we'll go over the Airport Department overview, we'll go over the budget overview and a multi-year forecast, and then we'll go over some proposed changes in the rates and fees, and end up with the, finishing up with the core three. Starting off, the Airport Department is part of the city's enterprise fund. We are self-supporting, no general fund subsidies. We get our revenues from tenant rents and user fees, and we're heavily federally regulated, and we can't divert revenues outside of airport operations. And we are a FAA certificated airport, regulated by FAA and TSA to provide our own firefighting unit, maintenance and repair, and our own law enforcement. The Airport Department consists of 11 programs and 5 divisions, and we have 73 total full-time equivalents for fiscal 24 that we're proposing. Consists of 8 supervisors, 5 managers, and the airport director, overseeing 11 programs and 5 divisions. And these 5 divisions, headed by the managers, business headed by myself, property and air services headed by Tony Haas, certifications and operations headed by Michael Smith, capital planning and development by Sarah Iza, facilities maintenance headed by Andrew Bermond. And here, like I said, we're proposing 73 full-time equivalents in fiscal 24. That's a change of a net increase in 2 from the adopted 23. In fiscal 23, we added 2 security aides positions, actually converted from hourly for better recruitment. And for fiscal 24, we're proposing an additional airport operations specialist. And also there's a kind of a reorganization in that Public Works is absorbing one of our engineering tech. That Public Works provides us engineering. They already provide us the engineering supervisor and project engineer. And so all 3 engineers would be provided by Public Works. We pay them through the supplies and services line item. And okay, now, the airport has seen record passenger counts, and off to the left, you'll see that compared to the average in the U.S., we've grown faster than the average in seat capacity. And if you compare that among Southern California airports, we're actually number 1 in the fastest seat recovery, off to the right chart there. And like I mentioned, we've seen record passenger counts since the end of the COVID pandemic. And it's increased about 50% since the last record we had back in 2019 from 860,000. We're projecting to end about 1.3 million by end of fiscal 23. Although, as you notice in the little box there to the left, the number of flights actually decreased by 32%. That's because airlines right now that we have, they're using larger planes. If you look at a snapshot in 2019, December 2019 alone, you'll see that only about 14% of flights used planes that are over 100 passengers, like the Boeing 737 and A319. And today, over 70% of our flights use those bigger planes. That's why we have much less in frequency, carrying a lot more passengers. Okay, now we're off to the budget overview. 2024 operating expenses. Let's see here. How do I change this back? All right. Oh, all righty, thank you. For 2024, we're proposing a revenue about $29 million. Going down the line, commercial, industrial, we're projecting an increase of about 12%. For fiscal 23, we're running about a little bit under budget on that because in the first half of this fiscal year, we were severely understaffed in that division. We're now fully staffed and have been leasing up our vacancies and project that we're going to continue leasing that up, and so that's why you see the big 12% increase. Non-commercial aviation, nominal 2% increase. What you don't see there is from 21 to 22 during the pandemic, they actually had a spike in revenue. Looks like more people are using private planes during the pandemic. Guess it makes sense because commercial aviation kind of went down significantly. Terminal revenues, so we're projecting an increase of 7%. This is a segment of revenue that's actually grown the fastest. It's kind of doubled actually since before the pandemic, but things are normalizing a bit, only 7% increase for fiscal 24. And for commercial aviation, 3% increase. We're pretty much tied to the current agreements with the airlines, which we're actually in the next year negotiating with the airlines with. And other revenues, it's pretty flat, but you'll see a big decrease there from $6 million down to $1 million, 22 to 23. That's because in fiscal 22, that includes the last tranche of our COVID relief, the ARPA grants, about $5.8 million. After 22, we don't have that anymore. However, we do have the concessions portion of that ARPA grant. It's about $400,000 we're projecting to receive in fiscal 23. And the other $500,000 on that would be like TSA income and interest income. Now for that concessions grant, it's really just a pass-through. We receive it, and then we credit the concessions to pass on that grant with. So there's not really a benefit to the airport on that other than making our tenants happy there. And you'll see an additional $1 million in 24. That's the customer facility charge that we'll be getting from the rental cars. That will be funding, I'm going to go over that a little more later on the capital. It's going to be funding half of our Southfield redevelopment. We've already pre-funded some of that. We're just kind of bringing it back to reserves to kind of recoup that amount. So now a little terminal revenues, like I mentioned, that's the fastest growing segments, about $10.8 million we're projecting for fiscal 24. Rental cars, nominal increase about 3%. We've seen pretty significant increase during the COVID, actually. I think it's because of the microchip issues. People are renting more because they couldn't buy cars or something. So it's normalizing now about 3%. Parking, we're proposing about 10% increase, combination of increase in activity and also a little bit of increase in rates that I'm going to go over in a little bit. And for concessions, you'll see that 2% and a big jump of 59%. Like I mentioned earlier, that was part of the credit that we're going to be giving for the next year to pass on the concessions portion of the ARPA grant. That's why you see that not much of an increase in 24 and a big jump in 25 when we stop the credit and continue receiving the full rent from them. Ground transportation, although it's about $500,000, it's actually grown significantly year over year. The more we ramp up the enforcement on that segment, the more we catch people that needs to be permitted and such. And so I think you're going to see some, about around 10% growth annually on that as we tighten up the enforcement in that area. And TSA building rent, we don't have any really control on that. So overall, 7% increase in revenue for '24. For commercial aviation, building fees, 3%, landing fees, 3%. And we are, although proposing, I'm going to go over this later, a little bit of an increase in the landing fees. It's not reflected on this because we didn't, it wasn't part of our submittal in the city administrator's presentation, because there was a process in doing that. We had to meet with airlines, and but we eventually got it. But that would be part of the staff recommended changes later. And landing fees and fuel flowage, pretty flat. And the RON, that's the remain overnight, we're expecting that to increase a little bit when we finish our Southfield redevelopment. We're going to be adding 3 additional remain overnight parking for planes, and so the revenue will go up accordingly with that. And here, just to kind of give you a snapshot of the pie of where we get our revenues. If you notice, the commercial aviation leases and airport terminal combined, that's 22 and 37%. That's about almost 2/3 of our revenue source. And the commercial industrial leases and the non-commercial aviation is about 1/3. Interesting thing here is that before COVID, this generally had been a 50-50 split. It kind of gives you an idea of how much the terminal revenues have grown as a piece of our revenue pie. And for expenditures, same with revenues. We're proposing expenditures about $29 million for a balanced budget. And salaries and benefits, a pretty large increase there, 19%, mainly for the increases. Really, we've only added like net 2 positions, like I said, but there's been quite a bit of salary increases and costs and stuff on there. And allocated costs, we have 8% increase. We don't have much control over that. It's the services that we pay the city, like IT services. That also includes our firefighting unit, which is about half of that amount. Supplies and services is where we have some discretionary on spending, and we're keeping that flat. When we find some funding, that's where we're going to add more budget on. But we are, the staff is very eager in finding cost savings throughout and doing things in-house now that we're fully staffed. So I feel that, worst case scenario, we can keep that flat. We did increase that last year about 13%. And so I think with that increase, we could hold this for a couple of years if we need to. Equipment, you'll see a noticeable decrease. That's because last year we budgeted some one-time items for the law enforcement, kind of updating their equipments and such. And so we're bringing that back down to the normal annual budget. And debt services and appropriated reserves, again, it is what it is on that. Transfer out, that's the majority of that is the capital expenditures. You'll notice it's pretty large in 23 there. That's where we are appropriating like the rest of the $5 million in Southfield redevelopment. Got lots of projects going on right now. And so total expenditure, about $29 million. Okay, and we're off to the capital. So let me know if I'm going too fast here. But capital, we have 2 separate capital funds. We have the FAA grant-funded and non-grant funded. And we're going to start off with the FAA funded projects. And that's the FAA eligible projects. They include improvements related to enhancing the airport's safety, capacity, security, and environmental concerns. And that's about a total of $9.5 million in FAA-funded projects. 9.34% of that is the airport share, which is about $895,000. And you'll notice 2 of the projects in there makes about 80% of the whole thing, namely the marking, signage, and lighting plan, and the taxiway golf, Mike, and Juliet rehab. That's about 80% of the whole fiscal 24 totals there. And next, we have the non-FAA funded. That's the streets, facilities, and the building maintenance. These are not FAA funded, and it's funded by the airport's operations. And in fiscal '24, we're projecting about $1.6 million in these non-FAA eligible capital projects, and about $1.8 million in fiscal '25. And if you notice, in fiscal '25, there's a big $1 million project there that's planned for the second phase of our Southfield redevelopment. And that's for the second phase of that project, which expands the parking down at the terminal, which would eliminate the need for the auxiliary overflow. And that'll end up giving us some savings. We don't need the shuttle anymore. So that's going to help us out. And let's see here. Next, we have some other funds. The Airport Development Fund, that's the fund that we use to develop the 6100 development. Currently, we're building that up by about $250,000 annually, roughly about half of the revenues that we're receiving from that project. That's for its continued maintenance and possibly the second phase of that development. And next, we have the Airport Passenger Facility Charge Fund. That's the PFC. That's the $4.50 passenger facility charge that almost all airline travelers pay in the United States. And that fee goes to upkeep and maintenance of the airport. Currently, it's funding the terminal that we currently have. And we'll be receiving the rest of that in a couple of years, in which we're going to go ahead and apply for a new one for the improvement that we're planning in a couple of years. And then we have the CFC, which is the Customer Facility Charge. And I mentioned earlier that beginning next year, we'll start getting about $1 million from the rental cars. That's towards the Southfield redevelopment. It's going to give them additional 60 parking. That's their half. And it'll also add space for the airlines. And it started in April this year, so we're going to get a little bit this year, and projecting about $1 million every year until we get that half of the $5.5 million for that project. And lastly of that fund, we have the Airport T Hangar Fund that we currently have a state loan in that's going to be actually paid off this year. And then that's going to help our reserves after this year. And that's the state loan grant that we got, state loan that we got to build the T hangars, the new T hangars that we have there in the airport. Okay. Here we have the multi-year reserves with about $2.3 million in projected use of reserves in fiscal '23. Like I said, with all the projects that we've started here, we'll end up with about $2.3 million in reserve above policy by the end of the fiscal year. And with a recommended balanced budget for fiscal '24 and '25, our reserve above policy will actually dip down to about $1 million by '25. That's just due to the calculation of the reserve requirements increasing there. And based on that, and beginning in fiscal '26, we'll start seeing the additional savings and revenue from moving that parking lot. And '27, you'll see a pretty big use of reserve there if we have to use some funds for the terminal improvement. And then in 28, our capital goes back down, so we're going to start replenishing reserves again to tackle the other capital projects that we have. We have some old building there, as you know. All right, let's see. Okay, we're off to the proposed changes in rates and fees. Starting with the parking fees, we're proposing the hourly rates to increase from $1.25 to $2. We're slowly trying to get aligned with downtown parking and waterfront. We don't want to jump straight to like $2.50 right away, but we're kind of moving our way up there, starting with $2 an hour. We're also going to make the first 15 minutes free for the short-term parking. Hopefully that'll help in relieving the congestion down the loop area, kind of encouraging people to use the short-term parking more, and hopefully it'll help. And the overflow, we're going to increase from $12 to $15. We've had significant increases in the shuttle services. We currently rent shuttles in there. We're in the process of maybe getting a contract to get like real shuttles to, more comfortable for passengers, and also terminal employees we're shuttling from the overflow to the terminal. So, and we're also, by the way, we're also replacing all the equipment down at the parking starting in about a couple of months from now. And next we have, for fiscal '24, we're proposing brand new permitting fees. And these fees, special events activity fees, if you notice, it's pretty much in line with the other special event fees within the city, though there's additional cost in the airport because there's more security regulations that we have to kind of keep an eye on. But we're proposing these fees in accordance to the Santa Barbara Municipal Codes, and which states, this chapter states that it is unlawful for any person to engage in any business or activity and provide any services to the airport unless they have fixed place of business or a specific operating area assigned by the airport director on the airport, which is occupied by virtue of a lease, operating permit, license, rental agreement, with the city of Santa Barbara permitting such activities as recommended by the Airport Commission, required and approved if necessary by the city council. So we're just wanted to make sure we're doing everything in accordance to the codes there. As for the airline rates and charges, pardon me, let's see, we're number 25. Yeah, the airline rates and charges to the commercial airline carriers, they're actually estimated billed in advance, which subsequently is reconciled with the actual cost as consistent with the Santa Barbara's residual airline agreement. So at the end of the fiscal year, what we do is the shortfall by any individual airlines will be billed or overpayment refunded. The only airline rates that were actually increasing for fiscal '24 is the landing fees. Bring that up to $3.19 per 1,000 pounds of maximum gross landing weight. But if you notice, back in '21, we were already at $3.15. I was lowered down to $2.59 based on anticipated COVID, and also we didn't know how it's going to pan out with the larger planes with Southwest. Now that we've recovered, we increased that fees. We've had consultation with all the airlines. Everybody's in agreement on that increase. And now we're going to conclude with the core 3, and it is the city's new revamped performance measurement program, replacing the P3 program. CORE stands for City Outcomes Reaching for Excellence, and CORE aligns with the Vision 2030 organizational initiative to bring smart governance practices to the city of Santa Barbara. In this CORE program, departments identify performance measure that aligns actions with department goals that speaks directly to the primary objectives of the Vision 2030. For the thriving workforce pillar, Santa Barbara Airport has set a goal to create a fulfilling work environment for everyone at the Santa Barbara Airport by providing training, development opportunities. And to achieve this goal, we'll make sure to use training budget, and we'll ensure that service satisfaction exceeds 80% and prioritize projects, specific goals that improves communication. Next, for the innovation pillar, Santa Barbara's goal will be to administer a safe, secure, and efficient airport by developing and supporting world-class facilities that meet community demand. And to achieve this goal, we'll prioritize exploring and using new programs and technology. We'll encourage kind of like a thinking out of the box to identify new ways of doing business. And lastly, for the organizational optimization pillar, our goal is to respond to the needs and concerns of the community by sustaining open and honest governance. And to achieve this goal, we'll encourage more collaboration with our neighboring agencies, programmatic changes, be more proactive in implementing programmatic changes, such as the Airport Noise Advisory Committee to address concerns related to noise compliance. And we'll be standardizing leases and fees for greater transparencies, utilize the airport's website, Everbridge, and the public meetings and collaborations to communicate effectively with the public. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and we're open to answering your questions. Thank you so much.
Questions from council? Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Try and go in order here. Thank you for the presentation. If you could pull up slide 9 first.
Ooh, yeah. 9. Oh, it's not working. 9, okay.
So you mentioned that we have fewer planes. I think this is the slide, right? We have fewer planes
That's it.
than we did before. And so my question is, with fewer planes, is that affecting our revenue? Even though we have more passengers but fewer planes, is that decreasing our revenue in any way because we're not getting the landing fees?
Not really, because we charge landing fees based on weight. So the bigger planes, more weight, even though it's less frequency, we found out that it comes out about.
Is that about the same? Okay,
Right.
yeah. Because I saw that later on it was the weight, and I was just wondering if that offsets it. So
Yeah.
that's my question there. If you could go to slide 12.
Well, oh, it worked.
So you mentioned the ground transportation and trying to figure out enforcement on that. How does that work? Do taxis, and in particular rideshare, Uber, Lyft, do they have to have permits displayed when they're coming in or out? And then would that be a matter of enforcing if you saw one coming in and then you'd have some type of enforcement? How would that work?
Yeah, the Uber and Lyft, it's pretty seamless. We have like kind of like electronic monitoring on them. Mainly the shuttling, I think. There's a lot of shuttles that we were seeing that come in that don't have permits, and I think there's room for growth on the revenue on that.
Where would the shuttles be? Can you give an example
They're
of?
coming from hotels and other places, maybe. So,
Councilmember Freeman, they're coming from all the local hotels, shuttling guests, including airline crew as well, but also out of the area shuttles as well. So there's the Central Coast shuttle that comes from the Santa Maria Airport that actually makes a stop in Santa Barbara, and some of those door-to-door shuttles that pick up passengers and drop off at the airport.
And does the airport itself have any interaction with the Airbus? I know there's other locations downtown where it picks up, and for any reasons, is there any interactions with the Airbus?
We have no direct interaction with the Santa Barbara Airbus.
Perfect. Just a couple more. If you could go to slide 17. And I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing my math right, especially for fiscal year 25. When I look at the total CIP for both years, but in particular, I see the 15 million for fiscal year 25. But when I look at those numbers and the numbers on the slide before, I don't. Am I just missing? It doesn't add up to 15 for all the projects.
you go
Back one.
back one there. You'll see the 594,000, that's going to be funded by the airport operations. And let's see here, and then if you add that to the 1.775, should come up to the 2.369 there.
I'm talking about the 15. I'm just not seeing
Oh,
where
the
the 15
15
million is coming
Oh,
from.
I see. Let me see this. 1.775. And the, that's, I think, that's including unfunded, I believe, that isn't in there. We took it out. Let me see here.
So what we're budgeting
Might
for is
be-
less than the 15.
Yeah, we're only budgeting for, 1.775 here, plus the 594 portion of 9.3.
Plus the 6.3.
The 6.3 million is actually, we're getting that, like 90% of that's coming from the FAA. Yeah, it would still be in the 12, in the 15 million there. But I think the difference is we actually have some unfunded that might be in that total.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to, because the numbers, I didn't see where the total of the 15. So
apologize
that's
for that,
funded
and-
and unfunded that we're projecting in there?
Yeah, I apologize. Our original presentation had unfunded on there.
Yeah, if we could
decided to
just,
close
in
that
the,
out.
for that, just clarify that, because that helps, because then we can see what projects are unfunded that, there might be funding for at some point or not.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
Perfect.
will do.
I wasn't misreading it. there.
Good catch, thank you.
And then on slide 23. Let's see which one. Being that the rate for the annual permit for the commercial activity and the non-commercial, can you just explain what those two are and why trying to understand why the rate is the same, if they're significant, are they basically the same type of permit for the same type of events, or are they different, and should we be charging a different rate for them?
So, thank you, Councilmember Friedman. So this is the first year since the approval of the minimum standards that were brought forward to the council, setting the requirements for flying clubs, independent instructors, independent mechanics to have to obtain a permit. So for the non-commercial and the commercial, it's really, the non-commercial is the flying clubs, and the commercial would be the independent operators for flight instruction and mechanics. We currently put into the calculations, it's based on cost recovery, and so it's the fee to issue the permit as well as monitor through the year. I do see that as we gain more experience with this program and monitoring it, those fees could change, and they may not be exactly the same, but for our initial calculation, they come out the same.
So because it's the first year, we want to get it on the books because of the minimum standards and the process we went through, and then we'll get more data and then adjust accordingly?
Correct. It's based on cost recovery, so as we better understand what those costs are in the future, we can adjust those fees.
Okay, perfect. And then on slide 29, and then I have two more questions. That's 29 and, what was my question on this one? It was, in terms of, you mentioned that we're going to have a noise advisory committee, and then holding a specific number of public meetings and collaborations with neighboring agencies. Can you just talk a little more about what our plans are in the coming year for those? Because those are important to our neighbors, to Goleta and the county, unincorporated area. And if you could just talk a little bit about what we're doing there.
So thank you, Councilmember Friedman. We are doing a number of different things behind the scenes right now, looking to improve our communications with all of our neighbors. We also have the letter of response back to the city of Goleta coming up, and some of that will be included in that letter as well. But we are really looking to schedule regular meetings with the city staff with the city of Goleta to just talk about all airport issues, noise being one of them. In the past, we had a subcommittee of the the Airport Commission, and that covered noise, but it really wasn't set up to be a collaborative effort. So we're looking to potentially set up a noise committee that consists of all of the stakeholders on the airport, flying schools, FBOs, the people that have some interaction with the people coming in and creating some of these noise impacts, airlines as well as community members from certain key communities around the airport having representation on that committee, where we can meet regularly, probably initially quarterly, but we're still trying to flush that out and have some real one-on-one dialogue with the people that are concerned, as well as the people that are somewhat in touch with the pilots that are flying in and out of the airport.
Great. So this will be an effort, because as you know, we're getting a lot of public comment, and there's things we can do, at least try to work with the airlines to take the voluntary noise abatement plan flights But the community wants us to do more, obviously, for those who are impacted by the noise. So this is an effort to work with them, provide even more access, and then we'll be involved with the city of Goleta in particular, as well as some of those constituents. So they'll have, rather than coming to council for public comment, they'll have a much more ability to engage on the issues that are affecting them, and we can say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what our limitations are, but also take feedback from them as well.
So thank you for the comments. Yes, in addition to that, we are also, the Airport Commission is making a recommendation that will come back to you in the future to also conduct an update to our FAA Part 150 noise study. And what we've realized is a lot of the questions that were raised are issues that date back to a noise study that was done in 2004. And so that process also provides a lot of public outreach and a lot of input, and we can make some good adjustments. That's what also brings the FAA in on an official capacity so that they can participate. I know the city of Goleta was disappointed that the FAA didn't participate in our December meeting that we had with them, and that's because it wasn't a part of an official process, so that would also enable the FAA to participate.
Oh, that's good news. So because we're updating the noise study that's 20 years old, we'll have most current data, which would help us, but that would be a point to where the FAA would be involved, and that's good news to hear. Okay. My last question, just overall, how are we doing in terms of staffing vacancies, and then in addition, recruitment if we need it, depending on what the vacancies are, and then overall retention of our staff out at the airport, because it's important that we can have as much continuity and long-term experience out there.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman. As Jonathan mentioned, we are almost fully staffed right now. And so overall, we are doing very well on staffing, although we do suffer the same issues that citywide everybody suffers. Our one division that is the hardest to recruit for is Airport Patrol, and that's due to all of the training required. So I'm happy to report that in our last announcement for Airport Patrol, we actually have 54 applicants that are testing right now for that, so it's looking like that is becoming a little bit more positive. But overall, we're actually doing very well on staffing, with the exception of Airport Patrol.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hastert, I had the same question on the new permit fees. I still don't understand them. So is this an additional cost to somebody who's already paying you for lease of airport property?
So thank you, Councilmember Jordan. This is not, if somebody is already leasing property, they are able to do business on the airport. So this is usually individuals, or it could be a flying club that does not have a direct relationship with the airport that would be paying for a permit to do business or operate on the airport.
Okay. So, for example, if Signature was going to throw an event in their hangar, social event, blah, 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 that type of thing, we're not talking about this right here. We're talking about a different type of thing where somebody wasn't normally out there, like they were using Chase Palm Park, only they're coming to the airport somehow.
So we do have a fee, I believe, in here. Get back to that. So when you look down specifically for commercial filming and photography, we do have a monitoring fee, and then I apologize, it should have been on here. Didn't we have a waiver as to what the top was if it's on airport event?
Yeah, there was some notes on the bottom.
So we do have for special events, for on airport leased property, there is a smaller fee because we do have security requirements and other things to go over for that. So it's capped at a certain amount, and we can provide some more information on that.
Pretty nominal?
Yes.
I mean, it's already there. It's not
Correct.
new, so everybody knows about it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, it should be reflected on the fees schedule that's proposed on your docket.
Full budget.
Yeah, it's a supplement page.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Can you go to slide 15, please?
Oops. All right.
So under special projects, I'm sorry if you've already explained this. What does that mean, a special project?
Special projects, mainly let me see here. We got a couple of big things in there. We have the shuttle program and also the PFAS remediation that's going on in the airport. They've run a little bit behind on that project. That's been appropriated, and so we're just going to be catching up. We're not adding as much new appropriations in that because they'll be using existing appropriations. So you'll see a decrease in that special projects.
Okay. So that could mean a variety of things from,
Generally, like I said, it's mainly the shuttle program and the PFAS that's making up the entire special projects
Okay.
line.
gotcha. So the shuttle program isn't something that's done regularly? It has to be a special condition?
Yeah, it used to not be a regular thing. Not until about, I believe it was last year or the year before that we started, it became to be a regular thing. And now, like I said, we're looking into possibly contracting that out because right now, our parking operator, which is contracted out, rents out vans to do the shuttling. But we're going to be getting some real shuttles, more comfortable for the customers and employees that use them.
So it's gone from a temporary operation into a regular operation that we're we're improving that operation and then ultimately trying to take it back away again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
going to go away in a couple of years.
Okay. Got you. Thank you.
So I was kind of curious about when we went back to the lease section of the revenues and the upcoming FBO redevelopments. And of course, you're just going out to 2025, and that's obviously beyond that. So do you anticipate a higher revenue from those leases when those things come to fruition?
So thank you, Mayor Rouse. We are actually currently engaged in that with a consultant looking at all of the entire FBO redevelopment. We just received a draft of an RFP to go out. They're doing the whole business case analysis to show us what the expected revenues are. So there will be some areas in their leases that the rates will decrease because they're going to be putting in private money and redeveloping those and potentially some buildings going out. There could be a potential change in the size of the leases. So ultimately, we don't anticipate revenue going down. I don't know that it will go up by much, but we will have significant private investment in the airport that we can also capture.
And we could also maybe potentially have other kinds of concessions, perhaps like a food service or whatever. When the FBO charges for fuel and tie down and whatnot, are those revenues captured with the FBO, or does the airport share in those?
So we do not share in the fees that they capture. However, on all of the fuel sales, we do have a fuel flowage fee that we charge for every gallon that they pump.
Right, very good. And I guess I'll just, since I'm right on FBOs, I'll just put this one in too. So when talking about our landing fees and the various things that we do and the schedule that we have, are those done airport per airport? Are they done on do we have a comparative basis with other airports or industry standards? And I'm thinking also even into the FBOs with GA and doing, tie-down fees and, the other kinds of ancillary revenues that would be generated.
So thank you, Mayor Rouse. That is actually all of we are looking into all of that right now. They're very good questions. They're the same questions that we have as the department with some new staff. So we are looking at neighboring airports and similar sized airports across the country because sometimes just in California, there's not another Santa Barbara out there. So I will say that some of our fees are below the industry average. We've seen that with some of our non-improved ground fees. Just recently, yesterday we were talking about that. And then some of our other fees are higher, but are they higher because of the area and restrictions and the cost for developing in this area or other reasons? That's all information that we're looking into and is all being included in the FBO redevelopment.
Yeah, because we do hear feedback from time to time from GA about, well, why are the FBOs doing this here, then doing that over there, and the fuel fees and whatnot. So do you have some kind of control over that? In terms of limits or standards you want your FBOs to charge GA?
So we can't get into the business of setting their fees. Obviously, we monitor that and see if they're reasonable or not. There is a lot of expense to doing business in this area, just bringing fuel in and out of this area, things like that. So from what I have seen, our fees are not exorbitant here, and AOPA and other groups definitely keep an eye on us. But we don't directly become involved in setting those fees. We definitely do monitor them.
And in terms of going back to the lease question, do we still have developable properties on the north side of Hollister?
We do, yes, and we are
So
actively.
we're looking, so on the out years, those will potentially be
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. We're currently looking at a fairly large project to bring forward to the council and in the just
Right,
coming
that's
months.
not, but that's not scheduled anywhere here, obviously, right? Okay, very good. And then question back on the activity fees. So with these, and going back to what goes on the north side of the field with instructors, mechanics, and all those things, are there limits or prescribed special individuals, or is that something that, is it opening the field more? Is that staying the same? Once again, from the feedback I get from some of the north side businesses, what that's going to mean.
So thank you, Mayor Rouse. I'm not sure exactly what the question you're asking is, but I can try to answer it and we can clarify a little bit. But we do have individuals currently operating as instructors on the north side of the field, mostly associated with the flying clubs. So they do have flying club members that have to stay current, or maybe want to get an instrument rating, something like that. So they have a list of authorized instructors. Those are the instructors that we have received complaints from the local flight school who has overhead and is paying for space to operate at the airport. So I don't anticipate additional instructors coming in and saying, oh, Santa Barbara is open for individual instructors now. Those are operators that are currently on the field that are just going to be going through this
Well, that's kind of
permit
what I was
process.
getting at without trying to name names. So, yeah, I mean, that's the noise that's out there, and that, you know, it's restricted or limited or not competitive, and so I didn't really understand what that might mean operationally, but.
So I think I understand the question a little better. Thank you, Mayor Rouse. We cannot limit if there are instructors that want to provide instruction on the field, with our FAA grant assurances, we have to provide access to them on an equal basis to other users of the field. And so that was the complaint, is that currently we are not permitting them and there is no equality in how that is being administrated. So with the minimum standards, we are now bringing that up to that level.
That clears up, thank you. And last question about the Noise Advisory Committee, and that's going to be comprised of stakeholders outside of the Airport Commission? Is that how I understand that?
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Correct. That would be stakeholders on the airport as well as community members off of the airport coming together to discuss all of the noise issues and seeing if there's anything that can be done working collaboratively with the customers of the on-airport stakeholders.
How large do you anticipate this committee to be?
We're still going through the phase of looking at this, but I'm going to say roughly 15 to 20.
Good luck. All right, very good. Further questions from council, comments, anything? I don't see, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done. We are adjourned for the time being. We'll be back.